Geto is often the subject of slander and downplay due to his minimal on-screen feats compared to how he's portrayed in the story. He also seemingly lacks many abilities that are common amongst most top tiers, such as the reverse curse technique and domain expansion. The cherry on top of all of this being that he lost to an inexperienced first-year Yuta. While his kit is limited in this regard, the downplay to his strength has gotten too far, to the point where we ignore simple narrative. In this video, I plan to show Geto is much stronger than people realize, and that he'd actually do pretty well in the culling games, even without these advanced techniques. Before we get into it though, make sure to like and subscribe, and without further ado, let's get into the video. The simplest way to scale Geto is through his feats and portrayal in hidden inventory. Geto's first major fight already sets a precedent that he is surprisingly powerful even at close range. Jiro views Geto as an overconfident Shikigami type fighter who doesn't feel comfortable in close quarter encounters, yet this notion is completely shown wrong when Geto obliterates Jiro and calls him out for being narrow-minded. This already sets a portrayal that Geto's physical abilities are not to be underestimated. The reason I need to establish this so early is to directly lead into how Geto compares to his rival, Gojo. There's an unbelievable amount of narrative implications that Geto and Gojo are equals. No, it does not mean Gojo is number 1 and Geto is number 2. They are equals, and the strongest together. We know they even have sparring matches together when they need to settle disputes. This relationship between them is integral to Geto's downfall and tragedy. In JJK, strength brings a certain level of not just loneliness, but also understanding. The weak cannot understand the strong, and the truly strong are separated from all others. As Gojo becomes stronger and surpasses Geto, they are no longer the strongest together. Gojo is now just the strongest alone. This separation from the person he cared about, alongside the death of Haibara and the events that Kotoji caused, are what caused Geto to fall the way he did. The idea that Gojo and Geto are equals has to be the case due to simple narrative and how the story plays out. Naysayers say things like, how could Geto deal with infinity, or Geto doesn't have an arsenal that could handle Gojo, but these things simply aren't true. Geto has curses that have simple domain, which could be a counter to infinity, as well as Geto having a plan to bypass infinity during the events of JJK0. Geto also likely scales to Gojo physically, as we know they have semi-serious sparring matches. If you're still not convinced of this idea, there are plenty of guide statements repeating the idea that Geto and Gojo are equals, even describing Gojo as becoming the true strongest after obtaining the reverse curse technique, meaning there was no way to say who truly was the strongest beforehand, as well as repeating the sentiment of Geto's heart being eaten away due to his loneliness. At this point, there should be no people denying the relativity, as it just becomes disingenuous. Now, what are the implications of this? We can simply upscale Geto off of Gojo's performance against Toji. Toji is initially unsure on whether he could take on Gojo in a one-on-one, and not necessarily due to his strength, but his fear of the 6 size, as he would be unable to sneak up on Gojo. In their actual encounter, Toji tries to disorient and attack Gojo head-on, and Gojo is able to react to this and swing Toji away, even claiming his curse tool is irrelevant as a win condition because he could never get close. Gojo's main fear in this fight does just come from sneak attacks, as Toji is extremely fast and agile. At the end of the day, this is exactly what allowed Toji to take the win over Gojo, through the distractions and view blocking of the flyheads, to his worry about Amanai. The point is, Gojo was able to keep up with Toji and was confident in preventing his speed from being a factor. He was able to use Max Blue to clear up the area and not allow Toji to sneak attack him. Geto knows Toji took out Gojo, yet he is still confident in his abilities to defeat Toji. The anime extends and adds things to this fight which aren't necessarily representative of the encounter. Everyone knows anime can mess with certain things by now, so I don't need to go over it that much. After seeing his most durable Cursed Spirit get taken out, Geto decides to absorb Toji's Cursed Spirit to remove his weapons cache. He does this in order to physically box Toji. This is very clearly supposed to recall back to when Geto is noted to be physically strong. What's the point of Geto's only other fight in this arc pointing out he's a strong fighter because he's physically strong, if it's not for the Toji fight? Regardless, Geto's plan fails as he cannot absorb Toji's Cursed Spirit, and in his state of shock, Toji takes this opportunity to attack Geto. Note, Geto's hand is still being repelled the very previous panel before Toji attacks him, as well as the shock at his literal curse technique not working, causing pause. Thinking Geto got speed blitz here by Toji requires you to believe all the narrative implication and specific statements are wrong, and that Geto is completely stupid for not only thinking he can box a guy who beat Gojo, but also a guy who cut his most durable curse. It requires such an extreme level of incompetence that it could even be considered bad writing almost, that a guy as skilled and powerful as Geto could even think he could handle Toji. But to put it all very clearly again, Geto is equal to Gojo, who can keep up with Toji and is confident in beating Toji, while Gojo has a hole in his chest. This is further supported by Geto having a precedent and portrayal of being a very strong fighter that then goes on to think he can box with Toji even after Toji kills Geto and his most durable curse. This alone already puts Geto in the upper echelon of fighters, but remember, Geto is only a teenager here and likely gets stronger afterwards, as his main goal is to eradicate all non-sorcerers through gaining strength. It's intuitive that a 27-year-old Geto would be stronger than a 17-year-old Geto, yet there is a physical limit to how strong characters can grow, not just through their body, but through their cursed energy reinforcement. Mei Mei in Shibuya explains how both of these things have their limits and that she reached her limit a long time ago. Because of this, she developed Bird Strike to become even stronger. But regardless of one's cursed energy use, efficiency, and reserves, there is simply a limit to reinforcement. It is not ridiculous to say Geto reached this limit a long time ago through his search for strength and already blessed physical capabilities. I'm not sure many disagree with this so far, as even fodder like Mei Mei have been able to max out their reinforcement. But the point of all this is to say, Geto is likely equal to Kenjaku in physical stats. It does not matter that Kenjaku has a better understanding of cursed energy, as it would still be undermined by his body's physical limit. This is not a contradictory idea at all, as Geto has no anti-feats as an adult. People often point out to his loss to an inexperienced Yuta, but this doesn't really mean anything. JJK Zero Yuta is at his likely physical strongest point in the series, even beyond his later versions. This is for very simple reasons. Rika is much stronger in Volume 0 than she is in the main series, and Kenjaku explains in Shibuya that Yuta is no longer a scary threat because he lost Rika's soul, which gave him unconditional copy and her boundless cursed energy. We know Yuta lost at least one of these things in the form of his unconditional copy, as even when Rika is fully manifested, she needs to ingest a piece of his opponent to use a copy. It is likely that he also lost Rika's boundless cursed energy and that the current Rika is simply a piece of it. This is clear because that is exactly what Kenjaku points out as to why Yuta is no longer scary. That boundless cursed energy is exactly what made Rika such a threat in Volume 0. It brought Yuta up to a level where he could blitz Geto, who, as we've already established, is at least on the level of Toji and pre-RCT Gojo. Although Volume 0 Yuta would still likely lose to current Yuta due to his lack of domain expansion and its counters. But that's not really too relevant to the point being made right now. To quickly go over Geto's cursed spirits, he has a special grade curse with unknown abilities and thousands of other normal cursed spirits. There's really not that many useful curses Geto has, even though he has over 8,000. It's mainly Kenjaku of curses that are actually useful, but there is one we know that Kenjaku and Geto both have. The centipede looking cursed spirits are surprisingly powerful, as they easily overpower and damage Yuji and Choso. Yuji at this point is no slouch, as he is right off of a Black Flash and is described by Choso to be a demon god, with Yuta being surprised at his strength. But Geto also has the inventory curse alongside Playful Cloud, which will become relevant later. There is more to talk about in regards to Geto scaling, but that can be talked about in the actual matchup portion of the video, which we can just quickly get into. Sendai is a complicated battlefield as there's so many ability interactions and characters one could talk about. For simplicity's sake, let's say Geto starts off the same as Yuta with Druve. This is a pretty bad matchup for Druve, as Geto is his direct upgrade with his much more versatile moveset. I'm not sure many care that I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about Druve, so we can just move on to Kuroroshi, who can honestly make or break Geto's chances of winning. Geto would need to deal with Kuro's Roshi Tsunami like Yuta did. Yuta did this simply by outputting Cursed Energy Blasts, and Ryu comments these blasts don't have that high of output, so the level needed to kill these roaches probably isn't very high. Geto likely can output blasts like this, but it's simply not in his character to do so, but what he could do is use his curses to get rid of them. For example, the curse he used to burn down a village in hidden inventory. This curse can do large blasts of fire that could easily deal with the roaches as they aren't very strong. Again, if you don't think his curses are good enough, he can probably just do Cursed Energy Blast like any sorcerer can. Now the main fight against Kuro himself is a difficult one for Geto, as he cannot heal from any injuries inflicted upon him. Ironically, he will be under very similar conditions as Yuta was when fighting Kuro. Yuta did not want to use RCT against Kuro as to not show the other players his hand. But even so, Yuta easily outperformed Kuro physically and was only caught off guard by him in a sword clash. Geto with Playful Cloud will definitely outperform Yuta here, due to not only being physically stronger than Yuta, but also because of Playful Cloud's strength depending greatly on that of the user. Yuta is just relative to Maki in physicals who's below Geto, and then you add in the Playful Cloud amp, he would be much stronger than Yuta was without Rika. The Playful Cloud Amp is so large that Maki in the Goodwill event was able to go from not being able to cut or move Hanami to slamming Hanami hundreds of feet away. This tool would likely take Kuro out very quickly, with it probably not requiring too many direct hits. Simple punches from Yuta are able to send Kuro flying. Now if Geto does get hit by the Cursed Spirit Buds, then the match is likely over due to his lack of RCT, but Geto has plenty of Cursed Spirits to work with, and even has special grades of his own. While yes, not all special grades are equal, it's more than enough for Kuro, who also has to deal with Geto's monstrous physicals. Geto also has likely access to mini Uzumaki, like Kinjaku. These are powerful and condensed versions of Uzumaki that would blow apart Kuro. And all of this isn't even really necessary, because Geto doesn't need to kill Kuro. All he needs to do is weaken him to the point where he can absorb him. I think it's fair that Uro and Ryu would wait to see what Geto is doing when absorbing Kuro, as it's an unknown factor and being cautious is in their nature at this point in the fight. But Uro, just like in the manga, would likely attack Geto off guard immediately. Uro really doesn't do a lot in the manga, she doesn't really do much damage to Yuta with her punches or even thin icebreaker. Geto would probably try attacking Uro and it might get countered like it did with Yuta, although countering someone as fast as Geto with a difficult to avoid curse tool might be difficult for her. It doesn't really matter as Geto is a terrible matchup for Uro. His Cursed Spirit manipulation could overwhelm her as he'd be able to use dozens of spirits. His centipedes could prove too much if a direct hit was landed. Uro does not have much durability contrary to popular belief. Yuta and Rika were explicitly holding back on her while barraging her. Then she later gets taken out by a non-fully charged Granite Blast. If too many direct hits land on her, she's probably down for the count. Kuro was a bad matchup for her due to his overwhelming bugs, which can be replicated by the thousands of Cursed Spirits Geto has. Geto could even pull out Kuroshi himself to fight Uro. This would likely shock both Uro and Ryu. Most importantly, it would interest Ryu to the point of stepping in. Because Geto did not use reverse curse technique, Ryu probably wasn't as interested in Geto as he was in Yuta at this point in time. Only when Geto pulls out Kuro would he view him as a potential dessert. But the same thing likely happens as the original fight. Ryu tries to step in with a Granite Blast that Uro avoids, and Geto might be able to shield himself with his spirits, but he's still probably getting damaged regardless. This Granite Blast didn't really do a lot to Yuta, so it probably isn't that big of a factor in this fight with Geto. This is probably due to the distance Ryu was at. If Geto was hit with a closer range Granite Blast, then it'd be much more troublesome. Geto would likely view Ryu as the bigger threat, and could probably just leave Kuroshi and a couple Cursed Spirits to deal with Uro. These fodder Cursed Spirits don't mean much on their own, but when used together alongside stronger curses like Kuroshi, they become an issue for a character like Uro. Dealing with Ryu at this point of the fight is actually super difficult for most characters, as they would need to get close up to Ryu while avoiding all of his Granite Blasts. Not even Yuta was able to avoid all of his Granite Blasts. He was only able to get up close to Ryu because of Rika allowing him to go in a hole under the bridge. If it wasn't for Rika, Yuta would have been hit there. Luckily, Geto specifically would also be great at this due to the sheer number of Cursed Spirits that can destroy the surrounding and cloud Ryu's vision, potentially even replicating Yuta's strategy if it comes down to it. Ryu vs Geto up close is very unfavorable towards Ryu. A stronger Rika than the one who was able to hold off and contend with Ryu was unable to get through Geto's guard. For comparison, Rika's punches were literally able to crack Ryu's skull open as blood rushes from his head. As I said earlier, Geto is much physically stronger than Yuta was here, while also being less tired due to him not having to solely rely on his own strength, and him not spamming RCT. Ryu would definitely be overwhelmed by Geto, and there isn't much else he can do about it in close range. Ryu's punches are powerful, sure, but Geto is probably just strong enough to withstand most of them with minimal damage, as he scales above Maki, who can quickly recover from a Black Flash from Sukuna. While this is a weakened Sukuna, this Sukuna would still be able to beat almost anybody as he's a blitz tier above Maki. But even if you don't want to use that, in the Volume 0 movie, Geto is able to take a Black Flash from Yuta and get back up almost immediately. This stronger Rika amped Black Flash is definitely stronger than a normal punch from Ryu. We've already established Volume 0 Yuta being an unbelievably strong character. Anyways, Ryu is going to do terribly against Geto's sheer speed and power, the power that can hold back a much stronger Rika than the one Ryu was fighting. This isn't even taking into account how his extra Cursed Spirits could provide at least some bother to Ryu. The aforementioned centipedes could harm Ryu and allow for openings for Geto, and Playful Cloud's versatility would allow for sneak attacks. How the fight goes from here is questionable. Do you think Uro would be able to escape from Kuroshi and reach the others, or do you think she would fail as Kuro is her direct counter? Either way, it leads to a domain expansion of some sort. If Uro manages to escape, she would likely attack Ryu as she sneaks people who are on the losing ends of fight, like she did with Ryu vs Yuta. She might question how Geto's cursed spirit would react if she were to kill him, so for now she needs to worry about Ryu. Regardless, it doesn't matter if Uro survived her fight with Kuro, as Geto would either be caught in Ryu's domain expansion or be caught in Ryu and Uro's clash. As I mentioned earlier, Geto already has anti-domain techniques in the form of curses with simple domain, but he's also confident in defeating Gojo if he had Rika with him. This doesn't mean Rika would box Gojo or anything, as Geto views her true value as an endless supply of cursed energy. We don't know how Geto was planning on killing Gojo, but it likely was through an anti-limitless technique such as simple domain, and then using Rika to power up some sort of attack, such as Uzumaki. Yes, Gege probably didn't have domains thought up yet at this point, but it doesn't matter as these events still happen in-universe, so Geto's plan would have to consider domain and especially Infinity, which was already in Volume 0. The point is, Geto would be able to survive long enough to kill somebody in their own domain. Sensing the spark and curse energy, Geto would immediately put up his own simple domain. It would not last long compared to a normal domain, but it would last long enough inside of Gojo's domain for him to kill Gojo, and Gojo's domain definitely has a much higher output than Ryu's. If his simple domain is close to breaking, he could probably refresh it with another curse or even the same curse again. Ryu's unknown sure hit makes it hard to say what would happen if Geto was hit by it, but it doesn't matter as he would be able to handle Ryu fast enough. Mini Uzumaki was able to blow holes even through Yuki, who is one of the strongest characters in the series. Even if they get into a full-on beam clash in the domain like Yuta and Ryu did, Geto would not allow Ryu to charge Granite Blast fully. A maximum Uzumaki with thousands of spirits colliding with a weakened Granite Blast would likely end in Ryu's defeat. Maximum Uzumaki was only ever defeated by a Death Binding Vow Love Beam with true form Rika. This Love Beam removed the limits of curse energy and allowed Yuta to beat Geto. While Ryu is one of the most durable characters in JJK, getting hit by a mini Uzumaki or maximum Uzumaki while already tired and weakened would likely prove fatal. Ryu was only able to barely withstand his own Granite Blast due to it being his own cursed energy. In a scenario where Uro returns and a domain clash is had, this gets even worse for them as now there is no sure hit for Geto to deal with. Kuroroshi would chase after Uro as she runs away from him and tries to break the domain from the outside. Not only this, but a second Kuroroshi could appear to break the domain as well. In the manga, Kuroroshi used Parthenogenesis to come back as a different curse. This is stated to have been done before he went dormant during the deadlock, so the same thing would occur here. With there being two Kuroroshis and Uro being on cooldown, it's safe to say she's out for the count here. This would lead back into Geto vs Ryu while the two Kuros potentially fight each other. I'm not going to repeat myself very much, there's not a lot Ryu can do to beat Geto. He is too versatile and physically strong for him. He'd have to get lucky and land a point blank Granite Blast. Geto probably isn't even going to get hit by most of Ryu's punches, as his combat prowess with Playful Cloud was shown to be insane in Volume 0. He was able to hold back both Ryuta and Rika at the same time. At the end of the day, Geto would likely be the one left standing. Turning a whole member of the 4-way deadlock into an ally in the form of Kuroroshi really helps Geto in this matchup. He can deal with less pressure from all sides and have the perfect counter to Uro. I didn't even go over the fact that Geto has thousands of Curse Spirit that could easily help him in this fight. He has a special grade due to his ability to make an army of these curses. If he really wanted to, he could swarm and off-guard many of these characters. The specifics of the curses being unknown are the main reason I didn't rely on them being anything more than distractions. But if Geto has curses like the one Kenjaku used against Yuji and Shibuya, then he can disorient and off-guard people like Ryu. Geto almost feels like a cheat character in this matchup, but there's really not much else that could be said. Geto is unbelievably downplayed in the community, and if you don't like him being above Toji in physicals, him being a rival to pre-RCT Gojo as a teen is more than enough to be considered strong. He is one of the only people to have ever understood Gojo. And with that, I'll catch y'all next time.